Welcome to Underrated Democracy.
uh, out over $173 million of taxpayer money to develop a vaccine which he didn't own and didn't put the contract provisions or have the smarts to put in the contract he owns. He uh, also then may have been involved in a discussion, because he said publicly he was in a discussion with the company on the terms of repayment of this and the intellectual property. And they came clearly to another deal that said, we're going to give you $150 million of taxpayer money on a clause that doesn't exist in the purchase agreement. We need to see the contracts from the Strategic Innovation Fund that the Department of Industry signed, the contract to develop this vaccine, and see whether or not there's advance payment in there. Obviously, there's no advance payment for a vaccine that didn't exist. We need to recall the Minister of Health, the President of Medicago, to explain why they claim there was a clause in this contract to purchase the vaccines that does not exist, why they didn't abide by the contract, which says the government of Canada doesn't owe any money if no vaccines are ordered. We reduce the quantity. What is it? It looks to me like the government of Canada is one of two things. Totally incompetent because none of them ever read the contracts and just accepted and wrote checks. Two, they have actually paid the intellectual property twice. They paid $173 million to Mitsubishi to develop this vaccine, and now they're paying them another $150 million for apparently technology we already own. So what's the basis for that $150 million? The only way we're going to get to the bottom of it is if the contracts under the SIF program that were signed by the industry minister are made public, if the unredacted version of this contract is made public, and if the contracts signed between Medicago, Mitsubishi, and Aramis and the government of Canada on this December 2023 deal that paid the $150 million are made public, so that we can find out why taxpayers have paid over $300 million for a vaccine that never produced a single commercial vial and gave it to taxpayers in Canada. Why is it? This is a massive scandal. I don't believe it's a political scandal in the sense that there may be Liberals involved, but to me it looks like a massive incompetence scandal on behalf of these Liberals yet again, who don't read contracts they sign, who don't read the payments of checks of taxpayer money they send to large global companies. This is outrageous to me. And if this committee does not have a vote for the motion that's here, it's voting for a cover-up. It's voting to cover up the Liberal incompetence on pissing away $300 million of taxpayer money when there is no contractual requirement to do so. Incompetence, stupidity, government waste. What's the reason? What's the reason that ministers came before this committee and claimed they were compelled to give that $150 million payment for a contract and a clause and a term that does not exist? Either it was intentionally misleading this committee or it was just sheer incompetence. So I can't believe that people would be so dumb as to give out $150 million to the largest company in Japan without reading the contract and without verifying that in the bloody contract that it requires them to do so, which it does not. So I call on members to vote for MP Ellis's motion so that this committee can get to the bottom of this $300 million scandal of this Liberal government. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Perkins. Dr. Hanley, please.
Thank you, and good morning to everyone. I've certainly been waiting with bated breath to see why we are being called out of our constituency times 2 weeks before Parliament begins, and what is the urgency behind this study. I'm not sure I'm any further enlightened now than I was. In light of a Medicago study that actually is still ongoing and still open, and also I think in light of 106.4s that have been called in other committees. So I think that there are some tactics going on. And I'm frankly quite worried about whether we are going to see a progress in the studies that we have as a committee committed to already, chiefly the women's health study and the opioid study that we had, as I understood, an agreement to pursue. We are all for transparency, and in that light, I do have some amendments to propose. I am not in favor of spending 6 meetings further on this when we already have had meetings on Medicago. It has already been before public accounts, and if there is a desire to review contracts, then I think we can support that, but not in favor of further derailing the incredibly important studies that we have on the docket waiting to go when we actually come back into session the week after next. So in that light, I would like to move an amendment, and if you indulge me. The amendment will read as follows, and we will circulate this in English and French. The amendment will be that the motion, the words be deleted after the words dated November 13th, 2020, that the rest be deleted, and the following be added. And the following will be that when these documents are received by the clerk, they be available at the clerk's office for viewing by committee members only for 1 week, to be designated by the committee no later than 30 days following the receipt of the contracts under the supervision of the clerk, and that no personal, mobile, electronic, or recording devices of any kind be permitted in the room that week, and that no notes be taken out of the room. And so to be clear, because I know this is a fairly substantial change, the full motion would read that pursuant to Standing Order 108.1, A, this committee order the production of unredacted copies of the vaccine supply contract between the Government of Canada and Medicago Inc., dated November 13th, 20, that when received, that when these documents are received by the clerk, they be available at the clerk's office for committee members only, et cetera, et cetera. So that is the amendment I'm proposing, and we will, that amendment has been sent to the clerk. Thank you.
It essentially guts my motion, or Dr. Ellis's motion, I should say, and totally changes the nature and intent of the motion. So I'm not sure it's in order.
Mr. Chair, and Happy New Year, everybody. Hope everybody had a chance for
You just watched some confirmed to cover up this shit. This is bullshit.
Well in Ottawa as well. I have, I guess, a number of things to say. First of all, when Mr. Ellis was talking about this 106, I think he made a reference to the bloc signing the 106, and the implication was that the NDP did not sign it. One thing I think needs to be clarified for the record is that the NDP never saw this motion. We were not given an opportunity to sign it or not. Mr. Ellis sent a request for me to look at whether we would entertain a Section 106 motion on the BTNX data issue, not on Medicago. So I think that for anybody listening, has to be clear that that we were not invited to see this motion in advance, nor given a chance to support it or not. Second, I just want to say for the record, this once again, I think, is an opportunity for me to express my grave disappointment in both the Conservatives, frankly, and the government for opposing the NDP's motion moved at this committee to amend legislation that would have produced a independent public inquiry into all matters of the government's handling of the COVID pandemic under the Inquiries Act. And somewhat shamefully, I watched the Conservatives sit on their hands and abstain, which allowed my motion to be defeated. We would have legislation before the House right now that would be close to setting up such a commission that would look at not only Medicago, but every vaccine contract.
Because we would have spent millions for nothing. The inquiries lead to nothing.
Come to this committee and talk about transparency and disclosure. I think Canadians need to know that they prevented that very disclosure and transparency from happening, broadly speaking, on the COVID pandemic entirely. And that is a contradiction that I think needs to be stated for the record. The NDP's position on how the government handled the COVID pandemic and how it dealt with health-related matters is that we have been pro-transparency from the very beginning. We believe that taxpayers have a right to know how their money is spent.
Bullshit.
Parliamentarians have a duty to probe and to hold the government accountable. I remember Prime Minister Trudeau's statement when he was elected in 2015 that he believed in government that is open by default, and I think that's a wise way to approach it. We should, as a I think, starting point, be very open and transparent, and that's even when hard information, embarrassing information, mistakes are exposed. In fact, arguably, particularly when errors are made, I think it's important that we have an open airing in a democracy. Having said that, I can appreciate all.
He's trying to fool you guys that are watching right now.
Debates on
He's trying to fool you. He just voted to cover it all up.
Disclosure of all the vaccine contracts, and to the Conservatives' credit at that time, through my colleague Michelle Rempel-Garner and other Conservatives, we did join together and seek and obtain vaccine contracts. But through that process, we were all made aware that totally unredacted contracts by commercial arrangements from the government is a delicate matter. I can appreciate that there can be certain commercial sensitivities. For example, price. When you have commercial vendors dealing with the government and multiple competitors are competing, they probably don't want their internal pricing structure to be known necessarily by their competitors. So I understand the need for some redaction. I will say that I think that that concept has been over relied upon by this government, and that's been, I think, unfortunate, because I think too many things have been held back under the guise that it's commercially sensitive when it really isn't. And so I think we have to be careful to strike that balance. So moving to this motion here as well, I have to also agree with my colleague, Dr. Hanley, that I fail to see the urgency in this. A Section 106 meeting is a particular type of vehicle that's used that upsets the regular schedule that's all been agreed upon. And it, to me, as a responsible parliamentarian, it's used for when a matter of national importance that's urgent requires our committee's attention. And I would point out that we do have an open Medicago study that this motion could have been moved at any time during that or during our regular sitting. So I don't really understand why we're here on a Friday before in our constituency week, as Dr. Hanley mentioned, talking about getting a contract. The issue is done. The contracts are there. They're not going to change this week or a week or two from now. We're talking about contracts that were signed several years ago. So I don't see the urgency. Now, the other thing I wanted to mention is I think there's a line to be drawn between health issues and procurement issues. When I read this motion, I didn't get a chance to study it in detail. Obviously, we only got it this morning. But when I read this motion that was originally put before us and as amended, it is deeply delving into, I think, issues of procurement, intellectual property, and the financial transactions. We are the health committee. And, there is an industry committee. It's already been pointed out several times. The medical contract was sought and obtained at the Public Accounts Committee. So we have multiple committees that are looking at this. So the question I have in my mind is this a good use of our time as health committee, particularly, as I will talk in a moment, given the competing priorities, because we can't deal with everything. We have to prioritize our issues. So is this issue to delve into have Minister Champagne, who's not even the minister responsible to this committee, come before us as we delve into commercial transactions and fiscal issues around procurement, important as they are. I will grant that to Mr. Perkins. He's done. I want to commend him for the deep dive he's done on this. He appears extremely knowledgeable about this. He's clearly read the contracts in great detail. It's not that they're not important. The issue is whether or not this committee's time as the health committee is this the proper venue for that. I find myself being unpersuaded by that. I want to talk about the competing priorities. We have a women's health study that's underway that's never been studied by this committee. So 50% of the Canadian population and all of the health issues that pertain to that are currently the subject of this committee. That would have to be postponed. Second, we have the opioid overdose crisis. And quite rightly, we listened to several filibusters before Christmas by Conservatives who went on and on at length about how critical the opioid overdose crisis is and how massively important it was that we get to that right now. So much so that they moved and we agreed to disrupt the schedule of the women's health study by interjecting meetings with the opioid overdose study, which, by the way, I want to commend Dr. Hanley for moving. It was his motion to put the opioid overdose crisis before this committee. We have many, many other issues of momentous importance of health in this country, including Indigenous health, including the fact that millions of Canadians can't see a family doctor. We have nursing crisis. We have issues of all types. We have a diabetes crisis. We have many, many issues to talk about. So the issue is, in my mind, I'm thinking, do I want to devote 6 meetings to delving into the Ministry of Innovation's dealings with a foreign company on how they handled the fiscal arrangements about the transfer of intellectual property? I find myself saying that doesn't meet my priority, nor does it jibe with what I'm hearing from my constituents about what they want to see from their healthcare system. Now, fiscal probity is important. Financial accountability is important. Nobody wants to see waste. I think the Conservative motion is very, very good at raising the importance of those issues. But public accounts is looking at this. The ministry or the Committee for Industry and Innovation, et cetera, can look at this as well. To me, I think that's the more appropriate place for it. Now, I also want to, I find myself unclear as well about what exactly has not been disclosed, because the Medicago contract was disclosed, I think, in largely unredacted form, if not unredacted form. I think Dr. Hanley's motion, if I'm not mistaken, and I may be, replicates the conditions that surrounded the disclosure of the Medicago vaccine contract at public accounts. Mr. Perkins read some very pertinent, I think, sections of that contract that give us the information we need. I mean, there's an issue, I suppose, of whether or not the answers given by the ministers and the president of Medicago are consistent with that or not. But that's not an issue of disclosure. That's an issue of I guess, politics and satisfaction of answer. We don't need more content. The information's there and it's revealed, and Mr. Perkins was reading it. So I'm not quite clear what information remains unknown from the Medicago vaccine contract. I also want to say that Mr. Perkins, in his last intervention, said something about that the amendment that was made by Dr. Hanley is inconsistent with this, or it somehow gags us. I don't read anything in Dr. Hanley's motion that says that we can't speak about it. There's nothing in there that says, after reading that contract, that we can't come and speak publicly about it or raise it at this committee. The amendment says that when the documents are received by the clerk, they be available at the clerk's office for viewing by committee members for 1 week to be designated by the committee, no later than 30 days, under the supervision of the clerk, and that no personal, mobile, electronic, or recording devices of any kind be permitted in the room. So that means you can't take pictures of it. and that you can't take notes out of the room. So that just means that we can read it, you can talk about it, you just can't take it. And I would assume that that's because we are going to be, even under this amendment, we are going to be allowed as committee members to read the full unredacted version of the contract, and we'll be able to speak about it. But what we don't want to do is disclose that, because we are, I would imagine, going to see commercially sensitive information. Interesting, I just want to say for the record, it's an interesting point in history. If the time ever comes where there is a conservative government, I'm going to remember this day very, very clearly and make sure that any future conservative government reveals full unredacted versions of all commercial contracts that they have with all vendors with the federal government. And we'll see if that happens. I did serve under a majority and minority conservative government. I can tell you that was absolutely not the position of any conservative government or conservative member of parliament.
So that makes it okay for your government and the Liberal government to do it?
So
what kind of justification is that?
I want to say that I think that the amendment is a measured amendment. It allows us to see the unredacted version of the contract, which I think is a good thing. It allows us then to see whether there's anything in the redacted versions that might cause us to want to schedule more time or recall a minister. I want to say again, 6 meetings. Nothing I've heard today would warrant devoting 6 meetings. Better part of it, that's a month in the parliamentary calendar terms, to this, when we don't even really know if the unredacted versions are going to really indicate anything particularly profound or untoward. Maybe it will, but what I'd like to do is move in measured fashion, read the contract, see the unredacted version, and then we can decide as a committee if we want to, or individually, whether we think that there's anything that is worth putting back before the committee to study. And again, what I'm going to be looking for as well is whether or not I think this is more of an issue of finance, procurement, or industry, or whether it's a matter that ought to occupy the health committee's attention at this time.
This guy is literally stonewalling this committee meeting right now. That's exactly what he's doing.
Urgent, frankly, fatal issues facing many Canadians while we talk. And where I'll conclude is this, do Canadians want us to be getting on with the opioid study, where there's families right now who have loved ones who are dying today? I think the number is, 7 people will die in Canada today, if I'm not mistaken, from the opioid overdose crisis.
The overdose crisis that your government
into the minutiae
and the Liberal government created?
Between several companies and the government, when other committees are seized of the matter and are more properly mandated to deal with them. I would rather deal with the matters of life and death and health, pure health, that are before this committee, as opposed to that grandstanding to try to embarrass the government in many different ways. So I support the amendment, and I'll be voting in favor of it.
Thank you, Mr. Davies.
That was a whole crock of bullshit.
Well, my colleague from the NDP spoke, and we don't really know why NDP is trying to block us from getting to the truth in all this. Because it has to do with how the government is managing things when we were dealing with the pandemic, with all kinds of contracts under the Department of Health that ordered the vaccines, and how those amounts, those funds were managed. That has to do with the Department of Health. So it has a connection with the Health Committee in that way. And there's always this mania of managing things in silos, and there's never anyone, one person at least, who is in charge of a holistic picture. So we need to get to the bottom of this, and our colleague from the NDP should side with the Conservatives and the Bloc Québécois, so that we get to know more about this, about the utilization of public funds that just disappeared. So my colleague, Mr. Perkins, was also saying this. We're not necessarily talking about a scandal. We're talking about competency of management. So we just want to know what happened with the contract and why those amounts were spent. So where are we going with this? We have the amendment before us. Our Liberal colleague moved it. And then there's also the NDP, where I'm just trying to situate myself in all of this. But I think the issue at stake here is super important and it's urgent. I'm in Quebec. I'm from Quebec. That's where it happened. Medicago was supposed to develop vaccines here, have facilities here. But the first scandal broke when we found out that after having received $173 million, the company was bought by Mitsubishi. And then there was this other payment of $150 million that was made without further us knowing any more about what was going on. So I think we are in a position where we have to shed light on what happened, why the money was paid, why the money did not come back. The government of Quebec also engaged in similar schemes, but they were reimbursed at 100%. So that was more efficiently done. But we have to understand why we're trying to beat around the bush, and rather than getting to the bottom of it.
Merci, Mr. Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Polius.
Dr. Pawlowski, please.
Yeah, I think we want to get to the vote, but having said that, I'm sufficiently ticked off about this that I want a couple minutes to speak about it. Yes, this is an important matter. How the government spends public money is important, and that's why we're willing to vote for the opposition to be able to look at the contract. So be it. Go ahead. However, to bring this forward as a 106.4 motion, I think is a real abuse of process. That's something that's urgent. These are contracts which are at least 2 years old. I remember, and those of us who sat on HESA throughout COVID will remember the fact that we had long discussions about the release of the contracts at that time. This is 2 years later. These are contracts which are already being made available to another committee, and yet some conservative in the middle of the night wakes up with this brainwave that, oh my God, what happened with those contracts and we haven't seen them. Let's call back HESA committee to discuss this right now. Well, is that really more important than, for example, the opioid study? I'd be far happier to be sitting here and talking about the opioid crisis, which the Conservatives were talking about over the last number of weeks. There's, as to Don's number, the number 6 came up, the Government of Canada website says 22 deaths per day. Is that worthy of calling back HESA? No, it doesn't seem to be, not to the Conservatives. They'd rather bring up this issue of the contracts and procuring contracts because that's more urgent. How about the women's study? And how about the things that we studied, like recommendations on breast cancer screening? Like, I don't know, thousands of women die every year from Canada because of breast cancer. You would think that maybe that would be something we would urgently talk about, but no, that's not urgent either. What's urgent are these contracts that are 2 years old. So I think it's a real abusive process that we're called back to discuss this. Is this more important? Should we put aside all those other things to study this for 6 sessions? Absolutely not. And you guys should be embarrassed for making this motion. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Pawlowski. Next, Ms. Atwin.
I'll cede my time, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Atwin. Ms. Gladue, please.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I want to clear up some of the misinformation and disinformation I've heard so far. The Public Accounts Committee is not looking at this issue. They are seized with other issues. And as I understand it, the Industry Committee is busy looking at the Sustainable Green Fund scandal, the problems with C-27 privacy bill, the Stellantis contract scandal. So they are also not looking at this. And I'm extremely concerned with the pattern of behavior I see with medical contracts. We've got this Medicago one, where clearly there were 2 contracts and there's been a $150 million payment to Mitsubishi that isn't mentioned anywhere in anything that we've seen. And so that's questionable. And this is on top of things like the Frank Bayless, let's spend 172 million, buy ventilators, never use them. And then where do we get the money back or sell those ventilators to do something like these kinds of things are happening all the time. And when the ministers come, we always hear they didn't read their emails, they weren't aware of the details of the contract, but there are electronic bank records that go with every one of these transfers. So I don't accept that we can't get to the bottom of where this is. And I also, would call that when the Liberals say they want to have transparency, but then they bring an amendment like what they brought, which is to say, okay, you can come and look at it, you can't take pictures of it, you can't record it. That puts us in a situation where, we see it. Mr. Davies has correctly said we could talk about it, but as soon as we say, well, the contract said this, and this is a problem, then the NDP will line up, as they always do, with their Liberal partners and say, no, it doesn't say that. And again, the public has no way of knowing what the truth is because there's no transparency at all. And so what I would propose to the amendment that's been made is a sub-amendment. The sub-amendment would be to take out some of the wording within the amendment. So it would be that when these documents are received by the clerk, they be available to committee members no later than 30 days following the receipt of the contracts. That would be it. And I would mail that to the clerk so that he has it in both official languages. Thank you.
I was listening to our NDP Liberal colleagues being inconvenienced by being brought before this committee to explain how $150 million of lost money by pure government incompetence are not somehow a priority to my constituents. Well, they're telling me this is important. They're drowning under a cost of living tsunami, a mortgage meltdown coming their way at the speed of a freight train. And this government, this coalition, is not interested in revealing the transparent facts around their incompetence of over $150 million. The carbon tax has been making life absolutely intolerable. I'm in Calgary. You have all seen the weather that we have to deal with here. So don't tell me and lecture to me why this is not a priority for my constituents. So I wanted to respond to some of the pablum I was hearing from some of our colleagues around the table very clearly. I think it's important to proceed to a vote. I defer my time to Dr. Ellis.
Well, that's fortunate because the next person on the speaker's list is, in fact, Dr. Ellis. You have the floor, sir.
Thanks very much, Chair. And can you just refresh the committee's mind here? Is there more speakers after myself, sir?
I have Mr. Perkins, followed by Mr. Davies, and that is the complete speakers list at this time.
Great, thank you very much. You know, it's interesting. We have a country that's falling apart. We have a healthcare system that is crumbling before our eyes. As mentioned, there are 22 people dying every day by opioids, and therefore bringing a motion forward with respect to $150 million at Health Committee, which directly assesses the veracity of testimony given by the Minister of Health and the President of Medicago at the Health Committee, makes perfect sense. What better time to do it than when Dr. Pawlowski didn't want his vacation or his time with his constituents interrupted, nor did Mr. Davies. That really makes no sense to me. We're here to work on behalf of Canadians, and as Mr. Majumdar correctly pointed out, so many Canadians are reaching out to us. Listen, I'm sure they're reaching out to you guys as well and gals, whether you want to admit it or not, that they are being crushed by the fiscal irresponsibility of this government. I find it laughable that Mr. Davies says, well, we didn't ask him to sign the 1064 when he wouldn't sign a 1064 which directly is related to a loss of $2 billion more because a company lied. Health Canada knew about it, and they accepted it as being true and moved forward anyway. So why would I ask him to sign a letter when he won't sign one for $2 billion, he won't sign for $150 million, and the results, of course, of the way he votes to gut this incredible motion that was before committee here today for transparency, which Dr. Hanley correctly said in his opening remarks. He talked very clearly about transparency and then introduces a motion to gut the transparency. Wow, talk about hypocrisy. Anyway, you know what? That being said, We know that there's an innumerable number of scandals. There's not enough committees to handle all the scandals this Liberal NDP coalition government is creating. And of course, there are not enough committees to attempt to address the fiscal incompetence that continues. Therefore, I'm quite happy to get to a vote so that we can ask everyone here where their cards are going to be laid and what side of history that they are going to choose to be on. That of competence, good fiscal management, or are they going to continue to be the costly cover-up coalition? That's the question that will be answered here today. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Ellis. Mr. Perkins, please.
I'll be unusually brief. It's a simple question. It's a simple question. I believe the Minister of Health and the President of Medicago lied to this committee about the $150 million payment, about a clause they claimed existed that doesn't exist. This committee has the responsibility to call them back and call them on their misrepresentation to Parliament. Thank you.
Mr. Davies.